Welcome back to another edition of Components Breakdown. Today we're going to look at a 2010 Gen Con release game called City of Thieves. City of Thieves is a 2 to 4 player game that takes about 60 to 75 minutes to complete. It can actually go a little bit shorter if you're familiar with the rule set and mechanics of the game. The mechanics themselves revolve around an action point allowance system, area movement, some light dice rolling, pick up and deliver mechanics, and variable player powers. Now, the central theme and objective of the game is to control one of the gangs within the city of Cadwallon. Within those gangs, you're going to have 4 different gang members. The overall objective is to try to amass the largest amount of loot and escape the city before the city gates close at night. So, let's open up the box and see what comes inside. We're going to spend a little bit of time here discussing several of the different aspects regarding the release of City of Thieves to the public in October 2010 of this year. One of those revolves around the transition of the license from AEG Games to Fantasy Flight Games right before the convention in August. The reason why I'm stating this is that AEG originally made a game called The Adventurers, and with that game they shipped their own line of pre-painted miniatures that would replace the generic miniatures within the game itself. Now, City of Thieves is releasing in the same fashion, where they're releasing 2 sets of pre-painted miniatures, and those are Set A, which comes in a blue box, and Set B, which comes in a red box. Now, both of these are going to be releasing at the same time that the game releases. Neither one of them are needed to play the game because everything you would need is initially inside the box itself. Also, as a promotion at Gen Con 2010, they released a one more figure, and he's been taken out of here. He's called the Duke of Cadwallon. And I'm not sure if this is going to be released to the public or if it's being sold or if it was just a promotion at Gen Con. So let's look at inside the box now and show you everything that comes with the game. There is a nicely illustrated rule book inside. It is full color, front to back. Now there are some issues with the rules. There's some questions that aren't quite answered in here. Mainly dealing with the adventure board and when certain aspects will happen on them. They're not the most perfectly written rule book, but it's enough to get you through the game. And if you go to the Geek and look at several of the messages, you're going to be able to fill out the rest of the rules that you need. It's not bad by any means, but there are 1 or 2 questions that you will have after you read the rule book. There is a very nice map that is included. Now the map has no kind of writing anywhere on it, so it's just a map of buildings and area within the city of Cadwallon, which is really quite cool. It's very similar to the Tannhauser board. There are 4 of these adventure boards, and each of them are double-sided for a total of 8 total adventures. And again, the illustrations in the game are one of the really high points of the game. It's beautifully illustrated throughout the entire production. Now inside here you're going to find several different compartments. It is in a very poorly made insert, I think. It's very cheap, but it does house everything that you will need in the game. There's a location for the dice, a location for all the cards. There is a bag of ducats, which is the money system in the game. There is a bag over here with all the different treasures that you'll find, as well as the portcullises that will close at a specific point in the game. There are additional adventure tokens that are used just on specific scenarios, so these aren't going to be used throughout the entire game. There's action points, and there's 28 of these total, of which 7 are going to go to each player playing the game. And then there are all of the miniatures. Now I have placed the generic miniatures back in the pre-painted miniatures box. I'm not using them, and I'm just using the pre-painted miniatures themselves, and they fit right back in here. And the last thing are all the character cards that go with the game. And there's several different character cards, and we'll go through these in a little more detail in just a moment. So let's set up a game and show you how the gameplay works and give you my overall opinion of what I think of City of Thieves. Now I've laid out a 2-player game, and what I'm going to do is walk through the components and gameplay mechanics briefly and give you an overarching idea of how the game plays from one turn to the next. As I had mentioned earlier, the overall objective is to try to amass the most amount of loot by the time the game ends. Loot consists of 2 different things. There are the numerous treasures that are spread out across the board, and ducats. They all have values on them, and whoever has the most wins the game. Well, the game differentiates itself from one playthrough to the next by the use of its scenarios, and it shifts with 8 different scenarios which are all housed on these adventure boards. And the adventure boards are two-sided. In the upper left-hand corner of an adventure board, you have the name of the adventure that you'll be partaking in. Right below that is the number of rounds that you'll be playing for this particular adventure. Right down the middle of it, you're going to have 2 different things. One is the setup for this particular scenario that you'll be playing, and any kind of special rules that you'll be using in this scenario. And those consist of maybe some special tokens or characters that will be coming into play. And on every single one of the scenarios, you're going to have 3 spots for cards, and these are called mission cards. Now, as I said before, the objective of the game is to get the most amount of treasure value, which is ducats and treasures. Those are usually happen at the end of the game with all the characters that you have leave the district. So anybody that's in the district when the game ends will not get their treasures. Mission cards are a way around that, in which that you get ducats during the game, which you get to keep. And that's very important because several of the treasures you'll lose, have stolen from you, or you simply won't get the character holding that treasure out of the district in enough time. Next, we're going to go down and look at the character cards themselves. As I had mentioned, there are 4 sets of gangs within City of Thieves, and they're all color coordinated. Now, each of the gangs has a particular set of 3 numbers on them, which consists of 3 different values. The top is the number of dice that they will be rolling and fighting. The second one are the number of spaces they can move in a turn, and the last one is their mind value. And that is needed for rolling dice or rolling a die to see if they are allowed to pick a lock on a chest to see if they open it. Now, one of the problems with the game is that all of the gangs have the same values, and they only really differentiate themselves by the abilities that they have at the very bottom of their cards. Now, everybody's ability is quite different from one another, but they're really not as balanced as I would have liked them to be. So, going around the board, just very briefly, you have the blue gang, red, yellow, and the 2-player game I have set up, you have green over here. Now, they all have names, and I'm sorry that I forgot the names. Just note that they all have their own specific names. Now, there are guards in the game as well that have cards. These are 3 guards that are not used in this particular scenario, but I've kept them out to show you. These do have some different values on them, and you have the Duke right here. And the 2 main guards, or the militiamen used in the game, are right here, and they are placed on this scenario in 2 different rooms, and I've simply placed them on the board, there and there. So there are 9 portcullises in the game, and these are used to lock down specific parts of the board when the alarm raises. There are 6 dice. The dice are usually used to pick locks and to have combat with one another. There's ducats, and they have different ranges in value. There are Arcana cards, and the Arcana cards act like special abilities that can be used. And you'll be drawing one of these at the beginning of every one of your turns, and each character in the game starts with 5 of these. And as I said, there's various different abilities that these allow. The other thing is each player will start with 7 of these action points, and these are used to designate which characters have taken specific actions, and once you use all 7, your turn is up. So let's look at the board now and explain the board and what it looks like. On the board, you're going to have several different locations, and several of the main locations are designated by little markers. These are important only for the scenarios in which you're playing in, which will designate specific places you need to go to on the board. There are several rooms on the board which are designated by red outlined areas. For instance, looking at this is one room and this is one room, or one building, so to say. And each of these at the beginning of the game, you're going to place one of these treasures face up. And it's all random which treasures you place in which location. The movement that takes place in the game are taken over these white lines. So when you move from one place to the next, from this to here is one movement, from here to here is 1-2 movements, and going in through windows or doors takes 1 point of movement. As I said earlier, every character is allowed 4 points of movement in the game. Around the edge of the board, you're going to have some exit locations where people can leave the board. These will be locations where you start your players, and there's 4 on each individual side. So when you play a 4-player game, you have enough space for all the characters to start off. These will also be the places where you leave the board when you're trying to exit once the alarm is raised. The portcullises will be placed on these locations to stop specific players from leaving. So there's some strategic initiative in order to try to figure out where you want to position your characters before the alarm raises and how much treasure you want to have on them. So now let's actually start explaining the gameplay, and we'll give you my final thoughts right after that. So I've cleaned up the playing area and set up a 2-player game. All the characters are already in the board. Everybody has their allotted number of action points, their 5 Arcana cards. The 3 mission cards have been placed on the board along with the round marker, and we're set to go. So we're going to explain the gameplay turn for one player, and it's very simple. At the beginning of a player's turn, they're simply going to draw 1 Arcana card and put it in their hand. There's no limit to the amount of Arcana cards they can have in their hand, nor is there a limit to the amount that they can play on each turn. The next thing they do is they roll for one of the militiamen on the board. They pick one of the 2 militiamen, they roll a die, and on a roll of 1 through 5, they get to move that militiaman 1 through 5 spots, according to the number of pips that show up. On a roll of a 6, nothing happens with the militiaman and he's busy doing something else. The strategy behind this is either you want to block off areas where people are trying to escape, maybe block off treasures, or try to initiate combat with one of the other players. The third thing you do on your turn is quite simple. You get to do 1 movement and 1 action in any order. So you can move and then act, or act and then move, in that kind of order. Movement is the number of allotted spaces on the card, so every character is allowed to move a total of 4 spaces. And then the 3 different actions you can take are quite simple. The first thing you can do is you can initiate combat for 1 of your action points. And that is simply rolling the number of dice on the character's card. So every character is going to roll 2 dice. The person that has the most amount of pips wins. When you win a combat, you get to steal 1 treasure from the opposing character, place it on yours. There is a limit of 3 treasures per character, and then move that character away 3 spaces in any direction. The second thing you can do is try to pick a lock. Picking a lock is quite simple. You just roll a die on a roll of 1 through 4, which is their mine value. You get to pick that lock and take that treasure. On a roll of 5 or 6, the treasure does not get picked. And the third thing you can do is spend 2 action points to bash open a treasure. That negates the need to roll a die at all, and you simply place that treasure on your card. So that's basically the way the game works. It is extremely simple. You do this through a number of turns until the alarm goes off. When the alarm goes off, you need to get as many people out of the district with as much treasure as you can, and whoever has the most wins the game. So the game visually is just beautiful. I love the artistic design. I think it's one of the highlights of the game. It's got a really good mix of strategy and luck, probably more on the luck side, which is a deterrent for most people. And it's fairly quick to play. It's about 60 minutes to set up and play, and then you're done with the game. And that, again, is another plus for the game. Now, there's a lot of negatives in the game as well. The first thing is, people that do not like combative type of games are going to hate this game. My wife just absolutely hates the game because all it is really is fighting from one turn to the next, and there is a lot of fighting in the game. Also, it's very redundant. We've played about 7 of the 8 scenarios, and it doesn't really matter which scenario you're playing. It feels like the same game from one mission to the next, and that's really deterrent for the game for me. Also, all the attributes on the characters are the same, minus, of course, their own flavor text, but it doesn't really give the games any distinct feel from one to the next, and they all just feel very generic. And the last thing is, the theme it's a great theme. Being a thief is awesome, but it doesn't really feel like thievery in any way. It just feels like you're going into the district, bashing people's heads open, taking what you can, and there's no real control at all. Now, you can mitigate some of the luck in the game with the Arcana cards and playing them at the right time, but still, there's just a huge amount of luck in the game, and it doesn't feel like any kind of controlled chaos that's going on, which is a real deterrent for me. This is not a game for me. I think it's geared more towards a younger crowd, but definitely steer away from it if you're into some very deep strategies. But overall, artistically, it's a good game, and that is City of Thieves, and thank you again for watching.